This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. A lot going on this week. It's another very important show. I could say it's a great show, but when the country's in this kind of a condition, I'd rather say it's an important show. With me is Jason Goodman, the owner and founder of CrowdsourceTheTruth, someone who speaks the truth, my good friend. He'll be co-hosting it with me today. And he was present yesterday in court when we had a hearing for Dr. Jerome Corsi. Of course, you might remember that in the last weeks leading up to Christmas and thereafter, I had filed criminal complaints on behalf of Dr. Corsi against Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his leftist conflicted prosecutorial hack staff, with people like Andrew Weissman, with people like Aaron Zelinsky, like people like Jeannie Rhee, who I went up against with the Clinton Foundation years ago in a RICO case. This is a crisis, and thank God for someone like Dr. Corsi, who will put his foot forward, who will pledge his honor, risk his life, and pledge whatever fortune he may have, and it's not much because this is very costly what he's been going through, and he needs the support. Go to CorsiNation.com. But he's taking on the forces of evil. And what Mueller's been trying to do was to bludgeon him into lying under oath to testify against the president to try to make his case that there's Russian collusion. Dr. Corsi said, I can't do that. I can't accept a sweetheart plea deal that you wanted to provide to me, where I would only plead guilty to one count of perjury, which is a felony. I can't do that in front of my creator, and I won't do that because it's not true. I can't live with that. And, of course, if you even agree that you're a felon, even if you get no time, which is what was offered, that destroys your life. Every time someone writes a story about you, you're a felon. We know that with Sheriff Arpaio is not a felon. He was just found liable for a misdemeanor, and we're challenging that. I have lawsuits on that with these very leftist print and cable television, and we'll talk about that later on. But he did the right thing, and he stood up to it, and he said, no, you stick it where the sun don't shine. I'm not going to do this. And he asked me, Larry, we've been friends for 25 years. Jerry has written stuff. I don't know that he's ever been wrong about anything he's written, but they brand him as a conspiracy theorist. Well, you know what? I'm proud to be called a conspiracy theorist. Conspiracies happen. And we're not theories when it came to the people that we went up against. So Dr. Corsi instructed me to file criminal complaints along with my co-counsel David Gray, with the Department of Justice, Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, the head of the Criminal Division, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and the Inspector General and the Office of Professional Responsibility. And we also filed complaints with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel of the District of Columbia Bar. We don't expect much out of them. We did it on principle. They're run by a bunch of leftists that have donated heavily to Clinton and Obama. They only prosecute conservatives for the most part. They leave their brothers alone. But it had to be done as a matter of principle, and we are going to push on the Justice Department because if the president takes control, as he finally should, and stops taking the advice of his television lawyers and actually tells the Justice Department, he's head of the executive branch, I want an investigation. There's nothing wrong with that. He can't say, I want people convicted. Okay, he can't do that as president. But he can say, let's get these things investigated properly, assign the people to do it. And I believe that there's a good chance in the end with our complaints that Mueller and his staff will be held accountable. They should be themselves prosecuted. The prosecutor should be prosecuted. But then we also decided we were going to take Mueller on frontally, not depend on other people to do our job, not even depend on my alma mater, the Department of Justice, who's become the Department of Injustice. So we decided that we were going to file a complaint against Robert Mueller, against the National Security Agency, against the CIA, and against the FBI for the illegal, unconstitutional surveillance that they have been conducting, which has extended to Jerome Corsi and his family. We know, for instance, just in the last few weeks, that the FBI went out and harassed Dr. Corsi's stepson. The only way they found out about the stepson, and he was doing legitimate stuff, just doing some computer stuff, recalibrations and things like that, was by intercepting text messages. There's no probable cause to do that because Dr. Corsi has not committed any crime. So consequently, for that and other reasons, we brought a case against Mueller for the violation of the Fourth Amendment, unconstitutional seizures, searches and seizures. And we also included his grand jury leaks because he's been leaking grand jury information, not just about Jerome Corsi. And in this respect, recently they leaked information right before Christmas about Dr. Corsi's efforts to help cancer victims with some doctors in South Florida, claiming that that was a fraud. That was not a fraud. Dr. Corsi, who's had cancer in his family, was trying to help these people, and he did. But that was leaked, and it was smeared in the Daily Caller. They used a quasi-conservative publication to get that one out, to make it look credible. So we sued on those two bases. And I said to myself, because I had gotten favorable rulings from this judge in the District of Columbia, federal court, Judge Richard J. Leon, early on when I initially sued the Obama deep state intelligence agencies, when Edward Snowden came forward and revealed this mass telephonic metadata surveillance against hundreds of millions of Americans. Judge Leon admirably stood up to the intelligence agencies, and he issued preliminary injunctions ordering it to stop. That then triggered the Congress to pass the USA Freedom Act, which allegedly eliminated this unconstitutional surveillance. But we know that it continued. We know that not just because there were reports issued by inspector generals where there were thousands of ongoing violations of the Fourth Amendment. Some of these employees at the NSA, for instance, were looking into what their boyfriends and girlfriends, husbands and wives were doing to see if they were cheating on them. But it was more serious than that. We know of the wiretaps of the Trump Tower when the president was running for the presidency and during the transition. We know of the unmasking of people like General Michael Flynn under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That was illegal. We know of the Steele dossier and Carter Page, that phony charade that they put on over there, which triggered the Mueller investigation, this witch hunt. So consequently, there was a pattern and practice of continuing, and of course now it's continued to try to gather information illegally on targets of investigations like Jerome Corsi and others. So now I filed the case, and under the local rules of the District of Columbia, Rule 40, you can designate a case as related if there's common issues of law and fact, which there were. Corsi's case is very similar to the earlier cases that I brought. So I had it assigned to Judge Leon. I figured at least he had made these rulings in our favor, and although ultimately he dismissed our cases on a technicality without allowing for discovery, and I objected to that. And I said, why did you do that, Your Honor? I asked him a question. I said, did these intelligence agencies get to you? Do they have something on you? I said it much more nicely than that, but he understood what I was saying because I had learned throughout the course of all these years that, in fact, Judge Leon, along with many other judges, had been surveilled by the intelligence agencies. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, some people thought maybe that's why he flipped on Obamacare. What do they have against Roberts? And we know that this went on with regard to Trump and anybody who challenged the authorities, the two establishments in Washington, D.C. that control the money and power. But I gave it to him figuring that maybe he got over this. Maybe with regard to Mueller, he would take a special interest as he did initially. And maybe he could summon his courage. Because the alternative was, if it went to some other judge, and again, we had a valid basis to have it assigned to him as related initially. But if it went to another judge, 90% of the judges in that courthouse, in the federal court in Washington, D.C., are Clinton and Obama appointees. They're highly partisan. Some of them are out-and-out hacks, like Amy Berman Jackson, who had the Manafort case. I had him in other cases. And I figured, let's give it a shot. Well, Judge Leon bit, and he ordered a hearing to be held on January 3rd. That was just this week, last Thursday. And it was over the issue as to whether he would keep the cases related, because our so-called government under our deep state Justice Department don't believe that it's being controlled by Trump. It's being controlled by this deep state with a lot of leftist Democrat lawyers over there. 97% of the Justice Department lawyers have voted for Hillary Clinton or Obama or donated monies. I thought, let's give it a shot. So he set this for a hearing. The Justice Department comes in and says, oh, we can't come to the hearing because of the temporary shutdown. I said, that's ridiculous. Leon ordered them into court, and we had the hearing yesterday on this. Now, I took a risk. I thought it was best to try to get Leon on the case if we could. Maybe he would have a change of heart. Maybe he wouldn't be so afraid as he was before to proceed. But to make the long story short, and we'll talk about that in the second segment with Jason, because he was there watching what was going on. He has his own observations, is that Leon bailed out again. And he made a reference to the fact that I had raised a concern that he had been, quote, harvested, that is, surveilled himself by the intelligence agencies in the earlier cases. He looked like he was frightened on the bench, and he made a ruling that he was going to throw the case back into the pond, so to speak, to have it come out randomly to another judge. And when he made that ruling, I wanted to say something more, say, Your Honor, I'd like you to reconsider. We do have a valid legal basis why the case is in front of you, although at that point, it was clear that it would be better if it was with another judge. But he literally ran off the bench like a frightened elephant. And it was just scary. So we're going to talk about it when I come back. But the case then was randomly assigned to Judge Ellen Siegel-Uvell, who was appointed by George H.W. Bush to the Superior Court and then by Bill Clinton to the federal court. And we're hopeful that Judge Uvell, and we're going to give her a reason, and we'll talk about our strategy when I come back, that she'll take it seriously, be nonpartisan, and we are confident of ultimately prevailing in the case. I'm going to be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Dangerous.
Don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Jason Goodman, the founder and the owner of CrowdsourceTheTruth, a great service, internet publication. He's going to give you his coordinates where you can go listen to it. I'm on it frequently. I'll be on it this week again. But I want to get your observations, Jason, on what you observed in that courtroom yesterday, because it was interesting and it was somewhat bizarre.
Indeed, Larry. I mean, I'm learning a lot about the court procedures because, when we heard that Judge Leon had denied the request to delay the hearing, I felt like, hey, here we go. This guy wants to go after Mueller, and I've heard about your interactions with him in the past. But yeah, I was surprised because it was clear to me. Obviously, I don't know the law as well as you and the other people there in the courtroom, but they were equivocating over the details and the sub rules and all that. And after he said he was going to turn it back for random reselection, there were words literally coming out of your mouth when he smacked the gavel and ran out of the room. And I was left thinking, wait, what was Larry going to say? So it's interesting to hear it right now.
Yeah, and that's an issue that we go through. We're going to talk about it later in the show, but judge selection is very important. We gave it a college try, and I'm hopeful that Judge Uvell will play it straight. She's been there for a long time. She is independent in many ways. She made a very good decision years ago against individuals on the Board of Governors of Voice of America, where she held those governors accountable for violating the constitutional rights of employees of Voice of America. That's very similar to the allegations that we have against Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his staff, because we claim that he's violated constitutional rights, and we're actually seeking to have Mueller himself pay large damages with regard to that to Dr. Corsi, and we're also asking for an injunction that he stop his illegal behavior. So we may have actually come out better the way it was, but of course I didn't know we were going to get her, and I was playing the percentages, and this is what lawyers are supposed to do.
Well, and just a quick question for the non-lawyers like me who are listening. When you talk about judge selection, you don't actually get to choose, right? I'm not clear on, so because it was a related case, it went to Leon? How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, what it works is if there's a related case, if there's a case that overlaps with another case that's in front of the court, to save judicial economy, to save resources, and because that judge has built up an expertise in that particular issue, in this case, Fourth Amendment violations, is that it was logical to send it to Judge Leon. And I came, so therefore you designate it initially to Leon. The other side can object, as the Justice Department did, because they wanted to go to some ultra-leftist judge. They were scared of Leon.
So they did object.
They did object. And at that point, the burden goes on the plaintiff to prove that it should still stay where he designated it. So that's what I was doing yesterday. And I cited a number of cases by Chief Judge Burl Howe, by Judge Royce Lamberth, who's the best judge in that courthouse, if not the United States, Judge Ricardo Urbina. And these cases all stood for the proposition you didn't even have to have the same plaintiffs in the case as long as there were common issues of law and fact. And in this case, an unusual circumstance that Leon's dismissals, which were no longer pending at the lower court, were likely to be overturned because since he dismissed those cases early on, improperly, in my view, because he was scared, I believe, had been threatened or felt that the agencies might have something on him. There was an intervening event at the Supreme Court, the Carpenter case, which cemented the fact that this kind of surveillance is unconstitutional. It came out in June of 2018. Oh. So I'm going to have a hearing next week. People from the public are invited to attend, the media. I hope you'll be there. Jason, January 9th, 9:30 a.m., 333 Constitution Avenue Northwest in front of the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals. And I'll be arguing the other cases that Leon had dismissed, have them sent back. Now, what was interesting is that at the hearing yesterday, Leon said, one reason I can't keep this case is because I have a conflict of interest. And he said, well, I have a conflict of interest because Mr. Klayman suggested that I might have myself been surveilled by the intelligence agencies. Now, that's good because if it comes back, it won't go to him. He'll have to recuse himself. It'll have to go to another judge. At this point, I don't want Leon.
But the very nature of what you're alleging would give any judge a conflict of interest because the allegation is that these agencies spy on every single American.
That's right. And, look, you have to say what you have to say. You have to say what you believe. You can't play patty cakes. You can't try to sugarcoat. We're there to get a job done. I mean, we're not like other public interest groups that just get documents and say, you go do it somebody else. We have to do it ourselves. So that was the risk I took. Case, we're still in court, and we're going to get a good result. I believe that. I'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm going to call this segment the War of the Left Against the Right. War of the World. It's like Martians landing with H.G. Wells. I mean,
just like what happened in New York.
Well, let me tell you
week.
something. The people that have now taken control of the House of Representatives, I'd rather have Martians. Okay? I think they'd be more rational. But they do have one thing in common. They're both red. Okay? So this week we had Nancy Pelosi. In fact, she was wearing a red dress. Take control as Speaker of the House. Immediately, impeachment starts to be talked of. This crazy congressman from Southern California, Brad Sherman, reintroduces his articles of impeachment within 4 hours, claiming that Trump has obstructed justice and having fired Comey and a bunch of other things. Meanwhile, you've got a Muslim congresswoman who was at an event last night by the name of Rashida Tlaib, called Trump an MF, saying that he needed to be impeached. Earlier in the week, you had a crazy Muslim doctor at the Cleveland Clinic using language like Louis Farrakhan would use, disparaging Jews and saying she was going to give them medicine to try to kill them, in effect. I mean, these are the people that are now trying to seize control of this country. They're either going to do it politically, or they're going to do it by killing Christians and Jews, or they're going to do it by simply putting the American people as a whole down. Now, think of this. We now have Nancy Pelosi sitting on top of articles of impeachment. She says she prefers actually to have the president indicted. She suggested that yesterday. That's her first choice. But her fallback choice is she's going to wait till Mueller comes out with a report. And you can bet Mueller's report is going to be scathing, and that'll crank up the impeachment proceedings. But now that we have articles of impeachment that actually were filed, what you're going to see is the House Judiciary Committee run by Gerald Nadler.
Another winner.
Yeah, I mean, he used to have to get 2 tickets on airplanes because he couldn't fit in one.
A little extension seat.
Right. I mean, I don't blame him because he's overweight. But the fact is he's a blowhard, and it kind of fits. Now, he's in charge of the Judiciary Committee. That's going to be an inquisition against Trump. You've got the House Intelligence Committee, or lack thereof, run by Adam Schiff. He's the other crazy congressman from Southern California, from West Hollywood of all places. Then you've got the House Oversight and Reform Committee by Elijah Cummings. I mean, he looks like the guy that was in The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy years ago. I don't know if you remember that
film,
Jason.
Yeah.
And then you've got Maxine Waters, who's going to take the banks apart at the Banking Committee, and they're all now out there saying they want Trump's tax returns for the last 10 years. Well, I'd like to see their tax returns, frankly.
Is he legally under any obligation to show his tax returns?
Well, they'll try to subpoena him, but that's the bad news. The good news is that the Senate and House subpoenas are not self-enforcing. You're going to have to go to court, and it'll probably wind all the way up at the Supreme Court, ultimately, as to whether, with separation of powers, they can get the president's tax returns. But we are in for a war of the left against the right. You see these crazy people in every aspect of society, ultra-leftists, atheists, radical feminists, anti-Judeo-Christian, radical black, radical Muslim, you name it, they're out there. It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and they're back. So this is what we're facing, and it's why people like Dr. Corsi are so important, because he's doing things the president should have done on his own a long time ago. But for Rudy Giuliani, has a couple martinis and goes on Hannity, or Jay Sekulow is a very nice guy and a very fine religious rights lawyer, but he's out of his league here. And the president has a counsel's office right now, in-house counsel's office that's understaffed, and he's not equipped for all of this. So we're doing what we can at Freedom Watch to be, in effect, the president's law firm in many ways. And go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause. We need the support. We need to get bigger. We need to ramp up. We've got citizens' grand juries on the horizon to hold these people accountable to ourselves, mete out justice peacefully and legally. But on top of all of this, we have an onslaught from leftist-controlled House of Representatives, Robert Mueller, bar associations that are trying to take people out that they don't agree with that are lawyers, such as Kellyanne Conway and others. And you have the social media companies and the media, which you're expert in, Jason. And I want to turn it over to you now to talk about what's been going on there, because we have our class action against Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Apple, Instagram. We've sued the New York Times, CNN, Huffington Post, Rolling Stone for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and go to Freedom Watch USA to support that. We need your help. I have my case privately for Judge Roy Moore against Sacha Baron Cohen, CBS, and Showtime for smearing him in a defamatory way, calling him a pedophile. He's a very fine man. He's not a pedophile. I've known him for many, many years. And we've had these crazy judges, these leftist judges who are out of control that I tried to avoid, with regard to Jerry. So if you put it all together, we're under attack.
Yeah.
And we got to push back. Well, I want to get your thoughts on this, Jason.
I mean, Larry, to a certain extent, I think it almost transcends a left versus right, because it's almost like malicious criminals have psychologically manipulated and then co-opted the ignorant, and now it's them versus honest people, because we've got people on the right. Robert Mueller was appointed by G.W. Bush, wasn't he?
He was. You see, and this is the risk that we now face. This is why we're in a crisis, because we have the stock market crashing. I believe it's primarily responsible. The responsibility primarily lies with the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi. They're destabilizing things. They want to take the president down. Of course, you have rising interest rates, which takes money away from the stock market, draws it away. You've got the situation with China. There are other factors. But I think it's primarily this political instability that's causing the stock market to in effect, crash. And you see that the president's weakened. And that's why you see Mitt Romney, who was sworn in yesterday, he basically announced he's running for president against Trump by attacking him, and he will challenge him. And the Republicans, 7 voted with Pelosi yesterday on reopening the government without a wall. So it's very fragile, the support, if any, that the president has from his own party. And you're right. It's the Republican establishment, of which Mueller is a part.
Yeah.
The Karl Rove of the world and the Muellers of the world that never wanted Trump in there. They wanted their guy that they could control. Can't control Trump.
Right.
And the Democrat establishments that are working together to take this president down so they can run their own candidates in 2020.
Yeah, it's very troubling. I don't think politics has ever been more venomous than it is right now. I don't think we've ever had collectively as a society a situation where, accusations are hurled. And I mean, you brought up social media. It's really, I think, after the 2016 election come to its full strength, because we never saw social media playing such a role in an election, in either of the Barack Obama elections, and obviously prior to that, it just didn't even exist. So it's sort of this new force on the horizon. And I remember as a young kid always hearing that Kennedy won the presidency because he looked better on television. And it was that really struck me, because it was an example of how media affected politics and that it affected the future of the world. So I think each of us have a responsibility when we're posting things on social media to have some integrity and not post something that's knowingly false. And you're talking about smears. They're rampant. People just smearing all over the place. And, when you, on behalf of Dr. Corsi, announced this action against Robert Mueller, the very next day was when that story came out in the Daily Caller, and it just reeked of being a smear.
Yeah, it was a leak by the special counsel staff. Jason, you helped uncover that Peter Carr, the spokesperson, who goes over to a restaurant called Paul Restaurant at 801 Pennsylvania Avenue, and that's likely where a lot of these leaks occur, so there's no paper record of them.
Yeah.
They're criminal, by the way, these leaks.
Yeah.
And but what I'm basically saying is that President Trump will be impeached. I don't think that's in doubt right now.
But let's clarify.
All it takes is a majority vote. Okay.
Let's clarify for everybody, Larry. The impeachment is the indictment. He's not guilty.
That's right.
If they impeach him. They're just saying, okay, now we're going to charge you with some crime.
That's right. And then it moves over to the Senate for the trial. And under our Constitution, you need 2/3 of the senators to actually convict. At that point, the president is removed.
Right.
So what was Mitt Romney doing? He was basically saying, I'm going to lead the impeachment once it gets over here to the Senate. With my so-called stature, I'm a good-looking guy. I've got the gravitas. And they don't count on the getting 2/3. Don't count it not getting 2/3 in the Senate, because a lot of these Republicans may bail out and join the Democrats, because they would love to have their candidate run, because Trump has broken up their money train, their power, and they despise him almost as much as the Democrats despise him, with some exceptions.
Yeah. Well, and back to what you were saying about the stock market, obviously there's so much turmoil and so much to do about literally nothing. A house divided cannot stand, and they've been expending so much energy on, trying to find evidence of some crime, which there was not, that the president hasn't been able to really dig in on anything. He's going to spend so much time and attention just on handling these smears and addressing all of this really useless stuff. It's so crazy to me that they're trying to impeach Trump for obstruction of justice for firing a guy who himself obviously obstructed justice. He fired Comey because he wasn't acting on tangible evidence of financial crimes in the Clinton Foundation. There's so much evidence there. It's strange to me what they choose to investigate and not investigate.
Well, and why are we doing what we're doing? Jason, I'm doing it at Freedom Watch and in my private capacity. Again, go to freedomwatchusa.org. We need your contributions, tax deductible. Jason's going to give his coordinates, help him out, because we need people to tell the truth, that don't sugarcoat. Dr. Corsi is the same way. Look, Obama's birth certificate, it is fraudulent. I mean, if you say that, all of a sudden you're racist.
Well, they don't even allow you to say it. There's a culture that's developed now where debate is not even allowed. I mean, the allegation is the digital document is a forgery. That is either true or untrue. Immediately, the people who don't like discussing that go to, oh, well, you're racist. Am I racist against PDF documents? It's got nothing to do with Obama being black and white.
Well, I'll give you another example. I mean, and I'm not a homophobe, either are you, and neither is Dr. Corsi, but he wrote an article that Obama had relationships with 3 men in bathhouses in Chicago. The 3 men came forward themselves.
Yeah, with
publicly,
evidence.
with evidence.
Phone records.
Yeah. So what's wrong with that? Okay, because if you're living in the closet, I mean, if you're gay, it's better that you're out there, and you shouldn't be ashamed or anything about it. It's the way things are. I don't agree with it. It's not my lifestyle, but let other people live their life as long as they don't impinge on me or my children or other things.
But lying about it is a lie.
Yeah, and it shows the deceit.
Yes.
Okay. Some people have said that about Chief Justice Roberts, that he's closet. Maybe that's what he's been hiding all these years. But don't be ashamed of it. You are what you are. Okay, and these are relevant issues. So that's the problem that we have today, is that you're not allowed to tell the truth. And we see that even on Fox News. You could never talk about the birth certificate on Fox News. They still won't do it. Mm-hmm. You couldn't talk about Obama being half Muslim and that influencing his Israel policy and his views towards Christians and Jews. But people need to understand those things, and that's what you provide. Yes, Jason, right. As well as I with this radio show. Please share this radio show. Go to CrowdsourceTheTruth. You're also on Pantheon. Patreon.com/CrowdsourceTheTruth. And people can also just search for Jason Goodman on YouTube. But, it all goes back to the Robert Mueller investigation. I mean, basically, Robert Mueller is the modern-day J. Edgar Hoover, and he is empowered by technology that Hoover could have never imagined. This Hammer computer system that is used to process massive amounts of data. I mean, for some people, it's even difficult to conceive of the concept of collecting all the data that each of us create. But this is what's being done. I mean, Bill Binney has told us how ThinThread and other programs that he was involved in were intended to parse this data and go through it. And that was years ago. That was 18 years ago. So we've got quite a lot of technology working against us, and people need to wake up to this. It's not a joke. It's not a partisan issue. This is a weaponized injustice system that can come after anyone at any time at their discretion. Well, and that's what Judge Leon initially ruled. He said this is almost Orwellian. It's a police state.
It's worse than that.
And that made headlines all over the world. The only person who didn't like what I did was Don Lemon on CNN. But somebody got to the judge. I do believe that. And but it's good that we have another judge for Corsi right now, and we're confident we're going to win this case. Yeah. So in any event, I'm going to get back with the verdict section because we need to wrap it all up. People need to understand where we are and what a crisis we're in. So Jason, we'll pick it up shortly.
Sure.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
We're back with the verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. The way I see it right now is that we need a full-court press. We need to wage a peaceful and legal Second American Revolution. We need to use every tool we can to avoid violence breaking out in this country in a much greater way. Of course, the left's been doing that now for at least a couple of years since Trump was elected. You have Antifa, you have Black Lives Matter, you have black Muslim groups, you have others out there trying to, in fact, stir things up, vigilantes. But we're going to use every avenue that we can in the courts. And that's why, notwithstanding the fact of my friendship and that I admire Dr. Corsi, he is putting his foot forward. Other people need to do the same thing. The president needs to take control of his own destiny. He needs to go by his instincts, not by what his lawyers are telling him. And he needs new lawyers, of course. But the citizens' grand juries that we're going to be starting in January. Watch what we do. I hope you'll cover them, Jason, and play a role in that. And just the educational efforts. We need to teach the American people the bases that this country was founded upon. And that's why you need to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Look at the Cliven Bundy case, ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. They're continuing with that appeal. It's absolutely a disgrace. Mm-hmm. If we don't win, I'm in front of the Ninth Circuit. Cliven needs your support in his legal defense fund. He'll be back in court, and if we lose, he's going to do life.
Wow.
And this is unbelievable. We've got our client Schaefer Cox, who's in a medieval prison, similar situation to the Bundys.
That's a horrible story.
In Indiana. We'll talk about that on a future show to a greater extent. But this tyrannical justice system is being used to enslave the American people, to keep them down because the powerful, the rich, and the new American, quote, nobility of Washington, D.C. thinks that they're better than we are. They think they get to call the shots. They get to have their riches. Look around this town. I'm in Washington today. Look at the wealth. Look at the new building in Southwest. What do you need all these people for? You know, Jason, we came here by cab today, Uber actually, and it was great. Nobody was on the roads.
Maybe they should just keep the government shut down.
They should keep it shut down. They don't do anything anyway.
Shut it off.
It could be Night of the Walking Dead. I mean, these government workers walk around like zombies. I mean,
all the bars would go out of business. Larry.
Yeah, what do we need them for the most part? We need a military. We need a police force. We need health, safety, and welfare. But beyond that, most of these people are pushing paper every day. They get to work late, need a donut, and then read the paper. So, you know, I'm not really concerned about the shutdown. I hope it continues on.
I mean, there's no real noticeable change to everybody's day-to-day life, right? Maybe they should really consider just totally, you know, shutting out parts of the government, saving some money.
When I worked for the Department of Justice, I was proud to be there. But I noticed on the very first day that most of the people in my section, the Consumer Affairs section, were walking around, kibitzing, shooting the breeze all day long. Maybe they did 2 hours worth of work. My assistant chief was a really good man. He worked hard. And the chief said to me one day, because I would come in, I really was motivated. I would work late at night. I'd come in on weekends. He'd say, Larry, why are you here?
Making us look bad.
Go home. Yeah, you're making us look bad. He thought maybe someday I might want his job.
Yeah.
But by the time I was done, in that section, I wanted to go to the AT&T section and help break up AT&T. Those people were dedicated.
Yeah.
They worked around the clock.
We need more of that now.
Yeah, but most of the people, even at the Justice Department, are dead wood. And I always thought you could fire 70% of them, and you wouldn't lose anything by it.
Might gain.
Yeah, and in fact, last week, the Federal Programs Branch in this Corsi case comes in and says, we can't come, Judge Leon, because we have a temporary shutdown, right? They're all going to get paid. They're going to get their back pay. But, they can't work. Of course, that was strategic. They didn't want the case to move forward.
Yeah, that's all they want to do is delay and kick the can down the road. I mean, when we're dealing with guys like Dr. Corsi and Cliven Bundy, these are men who are getting on in the years. If the case takes 2-3 years and then they get thrown in jail, that is the rest of their lives.
That's right. And that's why we at Freedom Watch, we're doing the heavy lifting. Jason's reporting it. He's uncovering scandals. We are your Justice Department. We just don't get documents and ask the government to do it for ourselves because we really have no government. We do it on our own. And we'll keep fighting in the courts and our citizens' grand juries and our education. And we will find those good jurists that will do the job, like a Judge Royce Lamberth or like Leon was in the past, and Judge Uvell now. And we will continue to fight. So tune in next week for another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, go to freedomwatchusa.org. Go to Jason's websites.
CrowdsourceTheTruth.org.
And God bless you, God bless your family, and God save America. We'll see you next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Larry, I said at the beginning of the show, we just don't report the news, we make the news.